Thank you. That was an amazing introduction. So because I want to make sure that you aren't falling asleep, that you're engaged with what I'm talking about, because I believe in engagement, right? This is about employee engagement. I want to make sure that there'll be some times where I might say, do you agree with me? And instead of having to have a whole conversation, you can just say, here, here. So let's start off this way. I feel great that I'm here at ELGL. Okay, great. So I know you got it here. All right. So I have a question for you. How many of you have actually worked at a job that you absolutely hated or you just could not stand? Okay, lots of hands. How many people here actually were at a job that they loved, like maybe even the job you're at now, and you didn't want to ever leave? Okay, so there's a nice amount of hands, but not as many as the first time, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. People often ask me why it is I do what it is I do. And while I don't have time for the full backstory, it's super interesting, so you should ask me about it later. I can tell you this, that about 5 years ago, I started working for a company that was going through a merger, and it was 5 companies that were coming together. And in that whole process, the culture began to take a deep, deep dive. And I was there running customer experience. And you wouldn't think I'd be noticing this, but I was noticing it. No one was paying attention to the people through all the growth that was happening. Anybody ever been a part of that? Here, right? So I noticed that, and I thought, over the years, people had come to me, team members from other teams, managers, asking, like, what the heck is going on with the executive team? What's happening with these leaders? They don't seem to get it. They're not listening to us. And so I would be the one who always be going back to the executive team, kind of giving them that voice. I would be the one uplifting people in the culture. And so anyway, one day I went to the head of HR and I said, listen, something has got to give. The trust is really bad. These 5 the people that are coming together don't know each other. They don't understand each other, and they're disconnected. And she said, you know what? You're right. You go do that. And I'm like, I go do that? I'm leading customer experience. How do I go do that? You're the HR person. And she said, no, you're the one who's always uplifting people and kind of the culture bearer, so you go do that. I said, okay, fine. So I started this employee engagement committee, and things were going really well. People were trusting each other. People were listening. We were doing all kinds of fun activities to bring people together. And then the merger kind of went splat. And then there were lots of layoffs. There were about 200 layoffs. I was one of them. And it was a big ouch. And it was ouch because I was a breadwinner of a family of 6, so it hurt a lot to have to lose that. But in that same instance, I realized that was the exact thing I needed to be doing. I needed to be that voice for employees back to organizational leaders about what it was that they needed to do to engage and retain their top people. So that's where I ended up, and I really do consider it a huge challenge, or a huge privilege. So, of course, I haven't even, didn't even move along with that with the slides. I'm just talking along. Maybe I don't even need the slides. So today we're here to be thinking about how to become more high-performing, right? And so it's really hard to do that, though, without people. We hear about AI and, oh gosh, all the stuff we hear about mechanics and things that are going to happen that are going to change the workplace. But in the end, the machines are never going to change what people can do for people. People are always going to have that connection and need that connection and need those bonds. That's always going to be the key. So this is the other slide I was supposed to do. Sorry about that. What does that even say? I can't see. Okay, so based upon this, most employees think of high performing as, if you meet my needs first, then I can meet or exceed the needs of your residents or your citizens or your customers. And let me say that one more time. From an employee's perspective, high performing really means that you are meeting my needs first, so then I can exceed or even meet the needs of your customers. So how many people here think that they work for a high-performing organization based upon that employee's definition? Okay, not a lot of hands. This is the problem. So most workplaces are losing 20 to 50% of their employees. And the reason why that is a lot of reasons, but do you think that's going to be based upon a high-performing organization? So when we think about high-performing, we're thinking about residents or citizens are getting the services they need. Stakeholders, shareholders, executives, people are communicating. There's connection there. We're reaching our goals. We're innovating. We're moving forward. You may see some turnover in a space like that, right? Because you're going to need to. If it's high performing, it means you're constantly moving forward. It means you're innovating. You're forward thinking. There are going to be people on the bus who don't think that way, and they're going to have to exit the bus. So there's going to be some turnover naturally, right? But you're probably not going to see 20 to 50% turnover in that space. So my 7 things, I kind of consolidated, and there are a lot, but I consolidated 7 areas that we need to be focusing on to retain our top talent and to really keep them engaged. The first, not going to surprise you. So the people who initially said, yes, I did leave my job, or I hated my job that I was at before, was it because of your manager? Let's just say, oh, no, here on that. Because of your manager, so you left because of your manager. That's a lot less hands than I'm used to saying. It's usually like 70% of the people who said that were absolutely it was the manager. And so it's important to remember that the manager can make or break that employee experience. You know, I think about a time there was one of the managers actually in that same merged environment. The executive leader in that organization would walk around and kind of get intel, and he would talk to all his team members, and he would talk to everybody, and then he would get the information and take it back to his executive team, take it back to the shareholders, and make it seem like ideas were his, the information was his, and he would not give credit where credit was due. But let's just get real. I've been a leader of teams for a long time, and I'm not perfect. I can think of a time where I myself had a project, dropped it on one of my team members' desks, watched her face as she was like, like frantic because she had a project, and I wasn't emotionally intelligent enough to pay attention to her. I went on to my meeting and then came back to her and said, I am so sorry. I was super insensitive to what was going on with you. And, you know, again, I apologize. Now, while she might rave about me today as the leader, it's not because I'm perfect. It's because I was willing to admit my mistakes, right? That's really the key here is how vulnerable are we able to be? How transparent are we able to be as leaders? But leaders really do make or break that in the situation. So when we think about the main factors of discontent in the workplace, it really is benefits. It's not benefits, wages, or hours. It's actually the boss. So I want to hear you guys say, just name some things that you think of when you think of your best boss ever. What are some traits that you can think of? Just shout it out. Okay? Empathetic? Present? Autonomy? Okay? Positive? Honest? Funny? Love it. Empowering? See how you're remembering these? And do you notice that these are all things that like don't cost a thing? These are the things that we call soft, but they're the things that are the most memorable, right? They're not so easy to do. So soft is not always easy. And that's the key thing to be remembering here. So law number 2 is appreciation. Recognizing our people all the time. It's said that employees, if they have not received recognition within 7 days, it's as if they have never been recognized. So any managers in here at all? Okay. So the ones who are recognizing your people, let's say you did it last month. That's great. They may not remember it because they remember it more frequently. And so what I always say is that in this space, because we give these dopamine boosts to our employees, every time we recognize them, we show them appreciation for a job well done. And by the way, we get that same happy feeling and dopamine boost too. We want to do it often. So we really want to put up a process in place to do that. Here's kind of an interesting stat on this. So 79% of employees cite that a lack of appreciation is the reason why they leave a job. And that's huge. It says to me that we better be getting this right and really be focusing on how are we going to do this. Now, here's the thing. It's usually the manager's recognition that is the most impactful. Would you all agree, those who have actually either are managers or have been managed? When your manager comes to you and says, amazing job today on that presentation, you just nailed it, right? That feels super good. But the manager can't do it all the time. I mean, they have projects, they have lots of stuff they have going on. So what I always say is that I think it's important for us to crowdsource recognition. So this idea of crowdsourcing just means that we're making sure that recognition is happening at all levels. We're setting up processes to produce really positive emotions. Because here's the thing, employee experience is about 90% about emotions. And leaders get to choose which emotions they unleash from within the people they lead. They get to choose that. So if we set up the processes for, organizational recognition, managerial recognition, either one-on-one, inside the team, right? Peer-to-peer recognition. I had someone call me the other day and ask me to do an interview for an article. And he said, I saw something that you wrote about crowdsourced recognition, and we're talking about or thinking about peer-to-peer bonuses, where peers can give credits for things that are happening throughout the day that in the end equal as a portion of their bonus. And he asked me my opinion, and I said, great, it's awesome. I love that idea because it takes so much of the pressure off the manager to do it all. And it doesn't have to be all of their bonus, but it could be a portion of it. And it feels really good, right, when our coworkers recognize the efforts we do with them inside of teams as well. Okay, This one's an important one, and I've heard Jay and Al and everybody talks about this importance of being heard, of people listening to us, and for us to know that what we say has power, that people will actually act based upon what it is we hear. In this feeling heard space, you think about a baby. It's a funny kind of parallel, but it really is true. Think about a baby, Nick, with a baby that's cooing in a crib, and they're making all these noises, and we hear them, and we go to them, and they're like, oh, good, you heard me. And then let's say they continue to do that, and it takes longer for us to get to them. So we don't hear them, or we don't respond, and they're like, what? Then their voices get higher, and then they start to like yell, and they're like, if they could stomp their feet, right? So if you think about employees in that space, we go to them, they come to us, we react. What if we don't react? All of a sudden, they may start to like scream. They may start to talk stuff, right, and gossip amongst themselves. So thinking about that analogy, then what happens if the baby cries, all of a sudden the baby stops to cry when we just have not come to them? And it's that same thing with employees. If they keep talking and we are doing nothing about what it is that they're saying, then they're going to become apathetic. And that is the worst type of team member that you want on your team, is somebody who's apathetic. They're not going to go over and above. They're not going to be innovative. They're not going to service your residents, your citizens, your customers. So it's something really important to be thinking about. How can we actually listen better? Obviously, we've heard focus groups. Some people have good or bad things around that. Employee surveys. I know there are people who hate surveys. Anybody else in here hate surveys? Okay, I know. However, if you saw someone respond like Alan did, where you have the feedback and they actually go do something, how much less likely would you be to hate doing surveys? You'd probably be like, heck yeah, I'm going to do that survey, because I know they're listening and they're going to take action based upon what it is I told them. Now, do I think you need to respond to everything they tell you? No. You have to be strategic in that regard. Kind of going back to what Lawrence was just talking about, you have to think about, how does everything that they're saying to you tie to your overarching strategy? Can what they say, can that inform what you do next? But listening is critical. When we're talking about that employee experience, when we're talking about those emotions, when people feel heard, there's just nothing that gives them more of a boost than being heard. Law number 4. Anybody here think their organization gets this right, like this does a great job of promoting and growing talents? Okay? That's a nice amount of hands. That's good. And so what that says, so what happens often is people will come to organizations. This is not just a millennial thing, by the way. This is a 46-year-old woman thing. This is a 60-year-old man thing. It doesn't really matter. People think that they're the only ones who want to be growing, flourishing, learning, and being challenged. In this space, when people get this right, they really will win that race, because they're not letting one seed of greatness inside of the people get away from them. It's a very big point to consider when you think about your organization. Here's another stat. 78% of employees said that they would stay with the organization if the career path was more clear. And what I hear in all the employee focus groups and the surveys and the stuff I do in the voice employee space is that they do not see a path forward. And so what happens is they feel compelled to go seek out more fertile ground. And that's really unfortunate. But again, we can do better, right? We can find a way to engage them. Maybe what we can do to grow and promote them is to let them be inside of focus groups or team types of collaborations or action learning groups, where you can be uncovering what you can do to find the strengths of your people, aside from doing assessments of them, right? But even if you do assessments like strengths finders, finding out, how do you leverage those things for the benefit of the organization and the team? Because if we know their talents, but we're not using them to the nth degree, then why do we even have them here? Why do we bring them on? So it's important to remember that. Law number 5. Off the screen a little bit, that's all right. Deep connections. This is a really important one. When you think about when you've had your best time at work, that job that you said, I loved it and I never wanted to leave. Raise your hand if you felt like you had some deep connections to the mission of the organization, the people in the organization, the managers in the organization, right? That's what we're talking about, connections. And it's up to the leaders to carve out spaces, physical and not, so that those connections can take place. So here's an example. If you're in a place that has high cubicles, you can't see your coworkers. Probably a lower likelihood you're going to actually interact with them. So why not shorten those? Now some people say, well, wait a second, that's my privacy, that's my space. I get that. But believe me, their desire to be deeply connected to their teammates and their coworkers is more important than that little bit 2-3 inches above there. That's one way. The other thing is creating environments. I know with Nick, we were in Adams County together. They had the different innovation academies and things, and they're able to work together, so creating kind of the joining environments where they're looking at problems and they're trying to solve those together. Those are, again, a way that you can create that deep connection. The other thing is, you know what? One of the things I would do when I was in Adams County, I would try to orchestrate times where the executive leadership team could come down and talk to the people at the front who were interacting with the residents to say, and just have plain old conversations with no agenda. No agenda, not recorded, not a PR stunt, just sitting down, having plain old coffee with a group of people and just talking and connecting with their people. And it's really important that we do that. I said orchestrate because when we think about employee experience, even though it feels good to us when it's happening, it's the background of the processes that actually creates those feelings. Okay, so with everything we've talked about, proceduralizing, making sure that the process is in place for recognition, for growing and promoting their talents. If you have that structure, when we're thinking about strategy, again, what are the tactical things that we do to kind of bring that down so that people feel all the things that we're talking about? You know, they say that only 27% of employees believe their organization even does great team building. And the important thing to remember about this is that it's through those teams that the connections also happen. This brings me to that sixth law, which is making team the focus. It's a little bit different than the connections to the extent that inside of teams is really where people realize they're doing their greatest work. When you're in the teams, again, going back to this Innovation Academy idea, when you're inside this group of people that are looking at creative ways to solving issues, you're able to use all your strengths together. It's like, holy smokes, like, this is brilliant. And you know at that point you have, like, reached your place, right? And that's where the team has to be the focus. So I'm not saying that we can't think of individuals. For example, you know, we're thinking about development plans. You look at the individual development plans. But in this case, it's how can I create a more fruitful environment where when we get teams together, they can produce even better results for us. So that could be, again, action learning teams. It could be, the other thing is team recognition. So we have organizational recognition. Why don't we do things where we promote teamwork? What happened within a team project, and bringing that forward and recognizing them in that space too. That would be a great solution to highlight team. The last law, I put this here purposely, paying them fair, paying them equitably. I put it here because pay's good. Everybody here want to be paid well? I mean, yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Anybody here ever leave a job for more money? Okay, I'm a rarity, it appears, because I have done that. But so in the end, though, pay is important, but it's not the most important. If we have not recognized our people and they don't feel appreciated, the money won't matter. If we have not found their strengths, dug deep, brought those out, the money won't matter. If we don't trust our leaders, the money won't matter. I actually would not have left that place for more money if that manager valued me as a person. They didn't make me feel like I was dispensable. They weren't threatened by my ambition and the speed at which I move, like Nick says here. And they said, wow, we can use all that energy for the benefit of our organization. That wasn't what happened. So the money then became an issue. Would not have been an issue if I had the other things taken care of first. So the thing to think about when we're looking at pay is make sure that you're evaluating the entire market. This may be HR doing this, but you still can be the catalyst for this taking place. You can do stay interviews. This is something that happens when the employee is there. They already kind of like you still, and still you go do the exit interview and they may be not liking you or their head is not in the game. So you ask these questions around, why did you come to the organization? What makes you get up in the morning, and just jump out of bed and want to be here? Was pay a factor? If you were to consider leaving, would it be for money? You want to know these things ahead of time. You want to get ahead of it, because the idea here is that we want to retain the people. It costs way too much to train them, right? And a lot of times in government, there's people who've been there 20-something years. They have so much of that knowledge that you don't want to lose it if you don't have to, if we can get their mindsets in that forward-thinking, high-performing way of thinking. So kind of driving this home, 37% of engaged employees would consider leaving for a raise of 20% or less versus the 57% for disengaged. What this really says, it just continues to highlight that those that are engaged, so we've done all those things we talked about before the money was the issue, those that are engaged are less likely to leave for money than those that are disengaged. So those are just sitting around going, yeah, like when's the day going to end? Money will be more of an issue. So I'm actually at the end of my talk, but I do want you to know that I do a lot of content in this area. So I have a free newsletter that I do every week. I put out every week an email. And you can get some freebies inside of that newsletter too. So if you have any questions after, we'll have a Q&A, and this has been great.